of Google Docs, I began to realize after a kind of clandestine encounter with one of my department members that I could end up getting back more classroom time by giving the students a much more structured approach to their pre-reading and their pre-activity, so that when we got together, instead of direct instruction and the I do being so much of our time because I was worried that they didn't have access to certain things, that I knew I was giving them certain things and that we could at start 2 or 3 steps in, so that class time now began to feel like I actually had more minutes because we weren't sitting and doing a lot of hand-holding. So we started with this, and then my goal was always to get them to do this, whether with me or without me, so that this could happen, where the light bulbs went on and they actually made connections or came in with understanding. And so what I used to do was I assigned the chapter, and we have this really structured approach in AP. I've worked with several people here, 2 of which joined us this morning, Joni Bigley and Jessica Rieger, and we started with outlines, where I said, pre-read the book, make an outline of what you think is important, and then come to class and we'll talk about it together. But the problem was, no matter how many lessons I devised to teach them about outlining, they weren't the ones that had all the expectations going into the unit as to what was important. And I was leaving it up to 14, 15, and 16-year-olds to decide what was important. And they were trying their best. Even when I would intervene and we would sit and I'd write on this and we'd go over it, the standard-based outline wasn't that great. And I would know that because we'd take a reading comprehension quiz. And I would ask them things that I knew were really important. But then we'd spend the rest of the week with me at the front of the room trying to go back and redo the things that they did on their own. Because we didn't need to sit and use class time for reading. What we needed to do was sit and use class time for discussion and productive connections between what they already read and their background information and where we could take that in the next few steps. And so about 3 years ago, I was talking to Jeff Heron, and he was telling me how he made these packets that went along with his AP Euro reading, so that the kids would go home and they would be told, read the chapter, but then really focus on your analysis of these things. And I thought, wow, that's way smarter than this, because this is leaving it up to them. I did not give them any outline whatsoever. But then I thought, well, his is great because you're still just using the text in a more structured way. But then we got these things, and my life started to change. College Board revamped the course, and they increased our accountability. They specified really clear learning objectives for students, and they had habits of mind. It wasn't just the history they needed, it was skills that they had to enter the room with. And these are the same things we all do. I happen to teach a course that's really guided by College Board, but I also teach economics that's college prep, and I know that there are certain things that kids need to walk out of the room with. And I was looking, took me a decade, but I was looking at their results, and I was noticing that the outcomes I expected from reading on their own before we started talking in class weren't visible. I kind of equated it to IKEA directions. I didn't expect them to build the whole bookcase, but I thought they could follow the stick figures on their own at least until steps 1 or 2, maybe 3 on a good day. But I wasn't even getting that far. And I was getting frustrated because no matter how much modeling I did, I still couldn't get them to where I knew their capacities already were. I knew they could do more. And our student populations changed. I went from my first year with 52 AP kids to a couple of years ago with like 110 AP kids. And so now I have a really broad swatch of all these kids from across campus who were trying their best. And then we have technology and tech-savvy kids. And what was great is that they outpaced me from the minute they walked in the classroom. So I knew that whatever product I could come up with, they could handle. There wasn't an issue with me giving them content or giving them access or giving them resources, because the things that they could troubleshoot long before we had computers in the classroom were far better than any 1, 2, 3 steps that I might be able to figure out in the midst of their presentation or in the midst of their project. And then thinking maps, and I had done depth and complexity before I worked in the district, and so these things helped us reorganize how they were going to access text. I knew through depth and complexity icons what types of questioning I wanted for them. I knew what expectations they aligned with in College Board, and I knew that I could give them thinking tools to do this, but I still was at a point where I would have to make a lot of copies. I'd have to make a packet of reading. We'd have to spend class time because I didn't want to send all those materials home thinking that they might not come back. So why not find a way to use this to put all of this together? And then I changed because I had less time to sit there and do all of that copying. I lost a little and I gained something where I was now needing to figure out how can we all be the most productive we can be with the time we have together. And TeacherTube is something that kids can use in class most of the time because it's unlocked on our web filter and you wouldn't have to worry about YouTube being blocked on their Chromebooks. So then what it caused me to do is say, I need a really focused assignment and I need to diminish the volume I'm sending home so that what they're doing on their own time is meaningful and productive so that when we're together, I get back those minutes in class where we can now start with conversation. Instead of starting with I do and direct instruction, we can jump into using their product to a we discuss activity together about making and clarifying those connections that they might not have got on their own. I still do lecture, but it has diminished the amount I need to do so significantly already this year that I really feel, like I've said before, that I'm getting a lot of my classroom time back. I can also give them clear expectations because the Google Doc allows me to show them what it is their focus needs to be. Unlike the outline where I'm hoping that they figure out the focus and what it needs to be. And then I can also include multiple resources. Jessica and I make these together this year for AP World, and the difference is hers tend to be better than mine, and mine tend to have little Easter eggs embedded in them so that they might find, because we just did the Renaissance this week, and one of the hyperlinks embedded in the document was which Ninja Turtle are you? Because we had just talked about all 4 of the great Renaissance thinkers, but it's things like that that encourage them to continue using the hyperlinks. So I don't focus on that, but I do embed 2 or 3 humorous links in there. And so it's no longer passive where I'm hoping that they get it, but they're engaged with the document so that this one thing that we're doing is so multifaceted that it takes the place of a huge variety of classroom activities and at-home activities that you're hoping they get. But then by the time you've done all the activities, I often found that I ran out of time to do the next step. So whether you teach an AP or a college prep course, you have and have been given clear expectations. And this is, my set of clear expectations. It's the curriculum framework from College Board. But then I can put this into a kid-friendly organizational tool inside the document where I know that they're going to focus on getting the things that they need so we can take that information and immediately launch into the next step of discussing significance, other cross-cultural connections, other places, and then external problems, things that our textbook left out, I can supplement with a crash course video so that I know that the textbook is at home with them, and that's a primary source that they can reference. But all these ancillary resources now make it so much easier for them to have a wide variety of opinions and perspectives and things that our textbook really can't do because we're not going to assign 4 volumes of text. They ask us to look for skill-based learning, not just historical content-based learning. So comparing and contrasting between different societies, which we can do through our thematic developments, and we can give them that direct instruction in the form of a written text direction that is in kid-friendly language that they can use to then begin organizing their thoughts. Additionally, we can create visuals and text spaces that mirror the skills associated with thinking maps. Now, they're not as free form. However, you could work within the Google Draw tool and then learn to embed that, but I'm still not there yet, so that's my next goal. So each of these things that they're supposed to do are demonstrating different perspectives and giving them the format in which to create it. And so I start always with the same perspective. I always needed them to have basic and necessary skills, which often began with functional vocabulary. If you don't know what you're reading, how can you then interpret anything extra that I'm going to give you? And so we start with hyperlink embedded definitions that are both included in the text, the resource that all students have, and then the internet resources where I hope they have that extra tool and desire to go look at the bonus material, the things that enhance their learning. So then we start with understanding the terms, and then they can access those extra resources. And so now we've got language of the discipline. We're able to talk with information that we didn't have before in a constructive way about the topics of history that we might not be familiar with. Then we need to synthesize new ideas. So we take this and we turn it into asking, describe the tradition or accomplishment, and what's the long-term consequence of that? Our book doesn't always go, they're time period chapters. But how come you can't speculate? How come you can't take your brain and stretch it a little bit further and use what you already know to come up with your own conclusion? Might they be wrong? Yes, but the fact that you're able to now think beyond the page and take this thought beyond what was just vocabulary is the skill that I really want them to be able to come with and feel comfortable with, because this is low risk. But now we're in class and we're sharing with our peers, but if you have something you can reference, you might feel more inclined to take that risky behavior and share your thought. Because it's not that you have to think about it right then, you have to reference it right then. And it's different where you have to come up with that original thought on your own, on the spot, versus having had time to think about it, being asked this, knowing that you might be asked that when we're together. So there's a comfort level embedded in the fact, or at least that's my hope, that you're going to be at home doing this, you're going to be speculating, even if it's not your best work, you've at least been exposed to it so that when we're together, we can start to get the best work out of you through collaborative discussion.